Morning, welcome to the Dailies on Echo Television, where we keep you updated with the happening from the front page of the Nigerian newspaper. I am Sarah Elisha Dasham. Do remember you can drop your comment and your views on Facebook as well as on YouTube regarding any issue that is of interest to you from the papers, and I will be doing the program alongside Rachel Tansey. Good morning,
Good morning,
Rachel.
Sarah.
All right, we shall be running through the papers, starting with the Daily Times newspaper.
On the Daily Times newspaper, ex-CJN Onegin moves to set aside CCT judgment that removed him from office. The big story on the paper, Tinubu seeks stronger anti-corruption structures in West Africa to tackle graft, says corruption one of the most significant obstacles to progress and prosperity of nations. Supreme Court reserves judgment in Bayelsa Kogi governorship election appeals. Federal government assures safety of humanitarian workers in conflict zones. Police invite Ajero over alleged terrorism financing, treasonable felony. Tinubu flies to France in new presidential plane. On monkeypox, resident doctors warn against consumption of undercooked bush meat. You can find details on page 4, and then also a picture story where we can see a scene of a demonstration where we are seeing the Special Intervention Squad having a training on how to be able to deal with civilians better during protests and related situation. And this took place in the Mobile Force Training College in Nasarawa. That's all the news on the Daily Times newspaper.
All right, let's take a look at the Vanguard newspaper. Police invite NLC president over terrorism financing, treasonable felon, detail found on page 16. How I'm winning war against corruption, coming from the President Tinubu. You can read that on page 9. Naira crook sale begins October 1st, coming from the Finance Minister Edu. As well, we have the big story, TSA, fresh panic as federal government demands 50% of aviation agency revenue. With the writer here saying lots of damage being done to aviation, a report coming from the ATSSAN. Nigerians' reputation may have been battered, coming from an expert. There's need to investigate this agency earnings as well. We are having Kiamu saying air transport not in danger. You can read more detail of that on page 5. Lagos, Osun, Oyo, Ogun declare public holiday because they will be celebrating the SSA Day. Detail found on page 14. As well, NNPC posts 3.3 trillion naira net profit, declares 2.1 trillion naira dividend. And on sport, PSG pull out of Oshime's race. You can find that inside the paper. We have a picture story still showing us as the petrol scarcity worsens. We can see Nigerians in queue trying their best, even those with jerrycans, even though yesterday we recall the NNP said that they would stop the sale of petrol to jerrycans. But we can see people with jerrycans. So you can do well to grab the paper in more detail of any of the story that is of interest to you.
On Blueprint newspaper, police to quiz Ajero today over terrorism financing and treasonable felony. Details can be found on page 6. Tinubu sacks Arabi, appoints Professor Usman Yunakan chair. Naira struggles as dollar index hits lowest since January. Rangers coach Ilechukwu Boso tipped to assist new Super Eagles gaffer. Details can be found on page 33. INEC to distribute PVCs from 192 wards, 18 local governments in Edo, Ondo on the way. The big story on the paper, Nigerian government to ECOWAS $88.6 billion annual illicit financial flow account for poor Africa's infrastructure. Tinubu wants ECOWAS protocol ratified and implemented. Abuja becomes NACIWA's permanent headquarters. Can find details on page 8. Relief as crude oil sales to Dangote orders in Naira begins October 1st. NNPCL posts 3.3 trillion Naira net profit, declares 2.1 trillion Naira dividend for 2023. MTN orders get permits to generate electricity. NIMET forecasts 3-day rain from Monday. Troops kill Boko Haram commander and others in Borno. 5 years after ex-CJN Onegin moves to set aside CCT judgment. And that's all the news on Blueprint newspaper.
Right, on the leadership newspaper, we have the communication retired senior directors. You can find that on page 7. Police invite NLC president over terrorism financing. You can find that on page 4. And what's trending on the paper, NAFDAC raised alarm over bread quality. Of course, we're seeing that bakers cannot afford, so definitely the quality of bread is dropping, and NAFDAC are raising that. Well, I think this should be collaboration coming from the government on how they can make these things to be affordable, and then maybe when we have all of these here locally, we'll see that the quality of bread will go back to the way it used to be. And the numbers, we have federal government target $500 million loan from World Bank. Both trending and numbers can be found on page 2. Cardoso deputies under scrutiny over alleged generous approvals. You can read that on the front page and continue on page 7. Fresh crisis rocks PDP over Congresses. And the big story on the paper, concern over fate of 20 abducted medical students. Victims spend 6 days in captivity. Abductors demand 50 million naira ransom. Just Maiduguri University seek release of students. You can read detail of that on page 4. Union Bank grows profit by 20% to 79 billion naira. Data found on page 20. And federal government begins Naira crook sale to Dangote and others October 1st. And on monkeypox, we have Sean Bushmeat consumption. This is, I believe, coming from resident doctors. You can read more detail of that on page 10. Abdullahi Usman appointed as Nikon chairman. You can read that on the paper. We have a picture story where we can see the Chief Judge of Nigeria, because we know he'll be retiring in the next 2 days. And so we can see him with other members of I think this is the members of the Judiciary Council at the office yesterday in Abuja. So you can do well to grab the paper and read more detail of any of the story that is of interest to you.
On Nigerian Tribune, ASU gives federal government 21 days strike notice. Police invite NLC president over alleged terrorism financing, treasonable felony, and cybercrime. Tinubu flies to France in new presidential jet. The writer says presidency says new plane, spacious, furnished with state-of-the-art avionics, customized interior, and communications system. The big story on the paper, crude oil sales in Naira to Dangote orders begin October 1st. First PMS delivery from Dangote expected in September. Hajj scandal, Tinubu sacks Arabi as NACON chairman, names Usman as replacement. APC following Buhari, other party leaders mourn as Omodewu Oyo chairman dies in USA. NNPCL posts 3.3 trillion naira profit, declares 2.1 trillion naira as dividend for 2023 financial year. Targets 2 million barrel per day crude oil production by December. Kyari denies paying subsidy on PMS. Experts disagree, says petrol subsidy is back. You can find more details on page 7, and that's all the news on Nigerian Tribune.
Notice us giving the federal government 21-day strike notice actually got my attention reach up, because we're hoping that the new session will be starting by September,
Yes.
and then you can actually count that we have barely less than 21 days in August. Today is August 20th already, so we have barely about 11 days or so to round up August, and then hopefully people are already planning to start, registration and all of that. And so if you could actually count 21 days, that this would actually affect the academic calendar if they eventually get on this. And each time we keep having warning coming from this union. I remember the issue of the electricity tariff have been one of the issues that ASU have been quite worried about, calling on the government to do something, and even saying that students might have to pay 80,000 naira for electricity eventually. So not to even talk about the issue whereby students are complaining about the increase in tuition fee, and then imagine having extra 80,000 naira added to be. Of course, we know there's nothing that you use in school that you've not paid for. You could take a look at your receipt and you see the breakdown, you know that virtually everything you have paid for it, or sometimes you even pay double of it and all of that. So I think this is where I'll call on the federal government. Most time we see when 21 days or 1 week ultimatum is given, we don't see anything happening until where we have about a day or two, mostly 3 days, and then we see rush coming in, meeting left, right, and center, and then eventually hear that the meeting ended in deadlock. Why? Because they didn't come to an agreement eventually. So I hope that there's still ample time for the government to quickly attend to the issue that ASU are bringing up to their table, because there's quite a lot of issues if you are going to look at it. ASU have brought quite a lot talking about agreement way back and all of that. So I hope the federal government will really pay attention, so we do not have the student having to pay for the sins of the federal government because they refuse to do certain things that are expected of them to do.
I think beyond the whole electricity tariff thing, where we have VCs having it as a major concern concerning what it will be running the universities moving forward. And we are also seeing the fact that the federal government is beginning to demand from the varsities to also turn in revenue and all of that. And looking at the fact that they are not funded enough, I think that is the complaint and coming from ASU. And I believe that this cut across a lot of things, most especially when it comes to the academic staff union. We are also looking at the fact that certain payments have not been given to them, just as you mentioned, the whole agreement dating back 2009, that most of it haven't been implemented. There's been long rope giving, and so far so good. They haven't seen most of what have been agreed implemented. And then moving forward, we know that there is also unsettled payment for ASU. Some of them got their payment, but then we are looking at NASU being kept aside. And whether we like it or not, these unions have a synergy, and of course, one needs to be heard. If one is not functioning, the other will not. And if NASU should come out and say they are going on a strike, ASU cannot perform, because without the non-academic staff, the academic staff cannot do anything, because certain offices will be cleared. We are having a session about to begin, a new 2024-25 academic session beginning. It means registration is ongoing. So it has ASU have to look out not only for themselves but also other unions that are affiliated to them, and they work hand in hand in the varsities and all of that. And when you see such long notice, 21 days is long, it's not 7 days, it's not 2 weeks, is 21 days. We're looking at 3 weeks here. Is enough, is enough period of time for the government to come. But we've seen where even 30 days was given to the government and they didn't do much about it. And ASU is one association that when they say they will go on a strike, they most likely go on a strike. What stops them from going on a strike is if the government comes in, steps in, and shows them a little bit of a green light. But when they don't see that, ASU, we've seen 1 month, 3 months, 6 months strike and all of that. So ASU do take action even way better than other union, in my opinion, because over the years we've seen how things have been in Nigeria. And that's the reason why when you go to university, even if it's a 4-year program, be ready for 5. If you're reading medicine or it's your case, you're going to stay really, really long in school, because ASU always take action when their demands are not met. So I just hope that this period of time, of course, they're looking at it is before session. I think they know what they're doing concerning this time frame, and they hope that the government steps in. I hope that they do just do something about it so that we don't have this body going on strike.
I know it's important for the federal government to note that this is not a warning.
It's a notice
on a strike.
Yes.
And just like you mentioned, we have 6 months. There are times where we had 6 months. We can recall what happened when their salaries were being held until recently it was being released and all of that. So just like you stated, we hope the federal government will take this, this threat, as far as I'm concerned, they are threatening them. We take this threat very, very seriously, because it will really not be fair where you have your mates in other private university finishing in a short period of time, and because you can't afford to go to the private university, you are faced with the way the decay that is happening. Let's not just the electricity, just like you said, there's a number of decay happening in the educational sector that we hope that the federal government can sweep into action and do something about it. Well, let's take a look at another paper, which happens to be the Punch newspaper, where we have Tinubu panel, Dangote refinery agrees on September petrol rollout, where we are seeing other papers saying October 1st. Here we're looking at a September petrol rollout. You can do well to read more detail inside the paper. IG unveils 169-man squad against kidnapping and others. You can read that in the paper. Opposition tackles presidency over new presidential jet. You can read that on page 26 as well. concerning the Edo governorship polls, where we are having Okpegolo, Obaseki differ over roads and others, and then INEC begins PVC distribution on Thursday. So it's advisable for all those who are in Edo State or Ondo State should please do well and get your PVC so you can be part of the changes in your own state. The big story here says tankers besiege depots as petrol shortage worsen, with the rider independent outlet sells 950 naira to a liter as black market hit 1,004 per liter. We said that yesterday, Rachel. I mean, I remember yesterday on my way going home, one of the public car I used to go and then paying, and then he was like, no, this money is too small. I was like, wait, this was what I used coming to work in the morning. How comes the going back is different? Now we said that in the morning that because of the, we'll definitely see that this will affect even people going. So I can imagine if transport is getting higher, eventually foodstuff will go higher. So just when we're celebrating that for July, we had a little 0.8, it wasn't really shaking. Now, because of this, eventually we're going to go back to where we are rejoicing that we're not. So I hope the government will swift into action. There's a need to make sure that petrol is rolling out, there's sufficient, so that we can see the price going down, because it's very hard for you to see that. For example, if transport fare is 500, it's very difficult for it to go back to 300 the way it used to be. So I hope the government will really look at this direction and do something about that.
I hope they do, because when you look at this, it's almost starting to be easy to predict certain things in this country, that if we are having independent outlets selling in this amount, and we know, we saw it also in the papers yesterday, where in Lagos it was at 850, and then for the NNPCL we have the mega and filling station, it was lower. Now, if independent marketers, as yesterday was 850, that is Lagos. We know that for sure in other states it's going to be different. And then now we are seeing, of course, we just saw a previous paper with those jerry can sellers and all of that, and they are the ones selling this at 1.4. And we know that just as we said it, like there are people that can't wait for the long queues. They have to move because this is business. There are commuters somewhere waiting for them, and they have to. So they rather go for that option, and in the end, we're at the receiving side. And just as you said, we're celebrating our inflation declining, and declining with at least a significant amount of percentage. It might be 0.9 thereabout, but then it is something that is for the first time. Not only did we have our inflation stable, but we saw it declining. So it sounds like victory, even if it's just for a month. However, with this, whether we like it or not, it means we are not going to record such success for the month of August when it comes to inflation. And it's because of the food inflation, and then we have the headline on being able to stay at a stable form. So it just means that for the month of August, the reports for inflation will not be the same. And then it is worrisome because NMPC keeps giving an excuse of supply glitches, but we have marketers saying that is not the issue. The landing cost is changing on its own. So regardless of supply, there is also change in the cost of what they're being able to get this petrol, and therefore we know how things happen regarding supply, whether it's available or not. The market needs to understand their losses, what they are giving out, to be able to get this and sell. The NNPCL says one thing, marketers are saying a different thing, and it means that there's so much undergoing concerning and petrol availability in the country, and supply glitch is just but a fragment, and it might not even be as much as every other thing that is affecting the fuel pump price at the moment.
Well, let's just watch and see how far we can go concerning this issue of shortage. Still another rider under that same story, we're seeing many fuel trucks yet to load. NNPC not supplying enough petrol yet. This is a report coming from Ipman. You can read detail of that on page 2. And Tinubu here is saying why I won't interfere in anti-graft agency operations. You can read that in the paper. And here we're still having Ogu FTZ, where we have Chinese embassy keeps mum on controversial deal. You can find detail of that on page 20. NNPC poses 3.3 trillion naira profit declares 2 billion naira dividend for 2023. Open defecation, Ogun plans, Kara market relocation, mobile court. You can find that on page 4 and 5. NLC protests as police probe Ajero for terrorism financing. You can find that in the paper. Here we have the picture story showing the Permanent Secretary, Minister of Petroleum Resources, Ambassador Angube, and then the Chairman, NNPCL Limited, Board of Chief Planning, and others during the release of the NNPCL Limited 2023 audited financial statement at the NNPC Towers in Abuja, where they are stating the fact that there has been no payment of fuel subsidy recently. The only thing we are noticing is the shortfall. So you can do well to grab the paper in more detail of what that press release was all about, and that's all on the Punch newspaper.
On Daily Independent newspaper, NNPC posts 3.3 trillion naira profit, declares 2.1 trillion naira dividend, targets 2 million barrel per day crude oil production by December. Fresh crisis hits PDP over Rivers legal battle and Congresses. The big story on the paper, new presidential jet is 15 years old. Nigeria is third user. Expert lament cost of maintenance will be exorbitant. Tinubu heads to France aboard new jet replacing old one. Hashtag end bad governance protest. CSOs call for release of Angel, Lenin, Eleojo and others. Plan independent probe into use of force on demonstrators. NLC invasion, police invite Ajero in relation to terrorism financing. East-West Road resume work within 14 days of face shutdown, Mossop tells federal government. Federal government begins Naira-denominated crude oil sales to Dangote refinery October 1st. Details can be found on page 6. Tinubu sacks Arabi as Nakon boss, appoints Usman as replacement, names Adigi J2 head NDPHC. Subsidy continuation, another chapter of Tinubu's opaque governance, a statement from Atiku. INEC begins distribution of PVCs in Edo Thursday ahead of Guba poll. Details can be found on page 29. And we have a picture story where we can see the president before his departure with his security advisor and then secretary to the government. And this happened yesterday, and that's all the news on Daily Independent newspaper.
All right, let's take a look at the Guardian newspaper. States 600 billion naira ROW fee stalled 90 power telecommunication projects. You can find out on page 6. As for scarcity worsen, Atiku knocks Tinubu over subsidy and refineries delay. Dollar defines fresh intervention, consolidates at 1,600 naira to a dollar. You can do well to read that business news on page 15. ASU issue 21-day strike notice over unmet demands. Police invite Ajero over alleged terrorism financing. The misplaced priority of state creation agitation. This is an editorial you can find on page 12. Bandit kill Castina governors, 8 orders abduct 29. Detail found on page 27. Seize presidential jet, expert highlights strength of Nigerian's case, caution on contradictory impunity. You can read that in the paper. We have NEDC to reconstruct Adamawa Borno link bridge. You can find that on page 27. And we have so the picture story up there still showing us the minister during the press release concerning the 2023 NNPC issue. And then as well, we're seeing those who are involved in the building of the bridge that yesterday. And that's all on the Guardian newspaper. But before we continue with the paper review, we would love to take a time out just to let you go through the stories. And then when we come back, we will continue with the paper review. Please stay tuned with us.
The gospel of Jesus Christ is our Heavenly Father's plan for the happiness and salvation of His children. Equa Television International shares the gospel of Jesus Christ because the world must come to the realization of the power in the atonement of sin through the grace and mercy of Jesus Christ. Sharing with the world the message of hope that can clean anyone from sin to enjoy the peace that is in Him. Equa Television International is live 247 preaching the message of salvation and truth to the world. Pray for Echo TV. Support Echo TV. Be part of Echo TV. Keep watching Echo Television International.
Welcome back. If you're just tuning in, it's still the Dailies. We have been looking at a number of stories on the paper. We're having asked to giving the federal government 21-day ultimatum. They will be going on strike if federal government does not meet their demands. As well, we're seeing that the president has left the country, of course, for the worker stay he will be having. And then we have other stories on the paper. We're seeing that petrol scarcity is still lingering. So we have quite a number of issues. We would love you to, drop your own comment and your views on. I still have Rachel with me. Thank you so much, Rachel.
You're welcome, Celia.
All right, let's continue with the paper review, looking at the Voice of Liberty.
On the Voice of Liberty, we have here NERC has given MTN Nigeria and other permits to generate electricity, and this can only make us wonder what will be the future of power generation in this country and the future of privatization. I think this is going to unfold a lot when it comes to electricity in the country. 2024 budget, how 10 Senate key officers allocated multi-billion naira projects for themselves. This is a report. The big story on the paper, despite Tinubu's fuel subsidy removal pronouncement, federal government to spend 6.8 trillion naira on subsidies by 2024, highest in 25 years. The President Bola Tinubu-led administration plans to spend 6.8 trillion naira on fuel subsidies between August 2023 and December 2024, representing a 17-month period according to reports. ASU gives federal government 21-day strike notice. Fuel scarcity as crisis enters 6th week, NNPC blames distribution challenges. 29 million naira monthly, too small for senators, governors, and 700 million naira. This is Senator Abu saying that, okay? Still on the paper, Tinubu sacks NACON chairman Jalal Arabi amid probe, appoints Professor Usman as replacement. And that's all the news on Voice of Liberty.
Is this a blame game or what? I really don't understand. We're having Senator Abu saying the fact that what governors are earning is different from what senators are earning, and you just cannot help but wonder. I mean, it's more like you poke my eye, I poke your eye back, and then let's see the whole issue of trying to expose this thing. And I think we've said this over and over already, Rachel, that personally, for me, I believe that it doesn't matter how much they earn, but we are not seeing the work.
We're not seeing the work.
There's no work being done. And I think this is the concern for a number of Nigerians out there. You are earning this money. Well, of course, I mean, I believe that Nigerians want you to be comfortable so I can make better laws. But then we're seeing you sitting down there very comfortable, sleeping. We have senators that till they leave the Senate, I mean, none of them have passed any bill to benefit their constituency at any point. So I think that this whole issue, whether the money is, because one thing we know, when Nigeria, Rachel, and we know the way things work in this country, eventually our governors will come out to state the fact that they are not even seeing this money. I know that that will be the reply eventually, but then I believe that the concern for Nigerians is let's see the work. We have governors that they are not even concerned about the roads. They're concerned about dashing out money to people. And you don't see any mega project going on in their state. And you just can't help but wonder. I think it was early this year where we saw how much our governors are spending on entertainment. And I've not seen any governor coming out to state all of this thing. So we'll just keep our fingers crossed and see how this whole saga will continue or end.
And I do hope that no governor responds back to Senator Abu, because when you look at 29 million monthly, too small for senators, and governors earn 700 million. So we know allocations that go to we know the allocations that states receive. We know what the FAAC allocation is. And we're looking at 700 million. This is close to a billion, just 300 million away from a billion naira. And even when you look at states that have higher allocations, I think the governor will be using more than 10, 30, that I'm looking at the high allocation and recipients when it comes to states are going to be getting more than 10 to 20% of the allocation to the state if this is their salary. We don't know, because governor salaries have never been disclosed. But then there are certain states that don't even generate up to $1 billion in a month. There are states that don't generate that much. So if a state governor is being paid 700 million, it means there are state governors that are being paid the whole revenue that they generate a month. And looking at the allocation, not until now that certain allocation was increased, there were states that weren't even getting up to 5 billion in allocation. And then imagine if a governor is taking out 700 million as his pay in there and all of that. We can't say it's a lie for sure, but I do hope this is a lie, because yes, we've never known what governors do get. And the second time, the tone for this statement is Senator Abu is saying that if governors are getting this much, then 29 million or whatever million is too small for them as senators. You are a senator under a constituency in a state, and we're talking about a governor that governs this whole constituency that you are under. I don't know what are the salary schemes for governors, but I think a governor is bigger than a senator. Even if you are at the federal government level, you are under his constituency in a state where he is the governor in charge. And you just have some local government in your constituency where you happen to be the senator. So either way, but I just hope, I think more would unfold. Maybe some governors will respond, but I hope that this is not true. It sounds like a lie, but in Nigeria, you can't sit down and say it's not possible, because we know that corruption is at its peak when it comes to what political office holders earn at the end of the month. So I just hope that this is not true. It sounds very outrageous, and I don't want to imagine that truly we have governors cutting away this sum as a monthly income.
Of course, that means they are earning even more than the president.
Yes, they are earning more than the president.
Well, we'll keep our fingers crossed and hear more detail on that. Well, I think let's take a look at, all right, is that all on the paper?
Yes.
All right, let's take a look at another paper, which happens to be the Nation newspaper. Alleged terrorism financing, another police invite NLC boss Ajero. You can read that in the paper. Lawyers list agenda for the Chief Justice of Nigeria, designate Kekere Eku. You can read that in the paper. President replaced the NAH NIDCON chairman Ariba with Usman. We have foreign banks should pay interest on stolen funds, says the EFCC. You can read that story in the paper. Naira crooks sale to Dangote and other refineries fixed for October 1st. NNPCL shareholders to get 2.1 trillion naira dividend. Oil giant declares 3.3 trillion naira profit. You can read that in the paper. $500 million bond investors to get 9.7% barred from Naira conversion. And then we have federal government begin disbursement of 200 billion naira to 75 big firms and then medium and small enterprises. You can read that in the paper. Tinubu flies to France aboard new jet, and downside of the paper are concerns over proliferation of arms by security experts. That can be found on page 4. And that's all on the Nation newspaper.
On this day newspaper, the big story, NNPC announces 3.3 trillion naira net profit in 2023, audited financial statement. Discloses 67,000 barrel per day pledge for $1 billion loan on PH refinery. No subsidies paid to any marketers in 9 years, NNPCL CFO. Says firms handling shortfalls not paying subsidy on the payment on petrol projected to hit 6.8 trillion naira by December. Company to begin sale of crude in naira to Dangote in October. Atiku is saying alleged payment of oil subsidy, another chapter of OPEC governance under Tinubu. Details can be found on page 12. On electricity supply, federal government pays 205 billion naira from 1.3 trillion naira owed power generation companies. Says rainfall not responsible for improvement in power supply. Lawmakers plan stiffer penalties for electricity asset vandals. Afreximbank achieves solid first half 2024 growth amid macroeconomic headwinds. Police invite NLC president for questioning over terrorism, financing, treason, and others. One failure to honor letter will lead to activation of warrant of arrest. You can find details on page 12. We made profit, where we can see the permanent secretary, Ministry of Petroleum Resources, Ambassador Nicholas Abo, and we have chairman NNPC Limited Board Chief Pius and the CFO NNPC Limited, Mr. Omar Ajayi, during the release of NNPC Limited's 2023 audited financial statement at the NNPC Tower in Abuja yesterday. And that's all the news on this day newspaper.
On New Telegraph newspaper, NNPCL Limited posts record of 3.3 trillion naira net profit in 46 years, declares 2.1 trillion naira dividend, targets 2 million barrel per day production by December. And here we have analysts inflation to fall further to 33.2% in August, and this is what it is. You can find that on page 25. Tinubu urges ECOWAS country to rectify, implement anti-corruption protocol. And on Edo Guber, we have INEC begins PVC distribution on Thursday. And then Blackhead, we have Israel agrees to US-backed ceasefire proposal. You can read that on page 4. As well, the big story, 5 years after, we have appeal court to hear ex-CGN Onogesu challenging his removal from office today. Stigmatization, reason persons with TB avoid treatment. This is coming from an expert. So if you are suffering from tuberculosis, do not allow anything to stop you. Do go and get the help that you need. Detail found on page 28. Or your APC chair, Omotewu dies in USA. You can read that on page 3, 26, and 29. Late soldiers, tension as troops swoop on Okwama over wanted President General and others. You can find that on page 26. Here we have a report for subsidy to hit 6.884 trillion naira by year end. Tinubu approved use of NNPCL Limited 2023 dividend for subsidy. Federal government to begin crook sale in naira to Dangote refinery and others October 1st. Park implementation face-off. ASU NEC meeting gives the federal government 21-day warning strike notice to transmit formal notice to Education, Labor Ministry soon. This is coming from a source. Here we have a study that says childhood sleep patterns influence adolescent alcohol, marijuana use. I think this is important for everyone to read that study that you can find on page 26, and that's all the New Telegraph newspaper.
On Punch Sports Extra, Chelsea keen on Osimhen loan deal. Atalanta tell PSG to pay 40 million euros for Lookman. In wrestling, Igali apologizes for poor Olympics outing. Boniface under probe over foul gesture. The big story on the paper, new Uche set to light up La Liga. We have Christian in details can be found on page 6. I am the foreign one, says Mourinho. Arsenal urged to snub Tony. Maresca defends Enzo captaincy. Pep welcomes Gundogan reunion. We have Saha backs Ronaldo for United return. Details can be found on page 8. Adesanya and more than du Plessis despite loss. Why Abosegi dumped insurance for Ethiopian club. Modric named in Croatia's Nations League squad. Details can be found on page 8, and that's all the news on Punch Sports Extra.
Right, let's round it up with the Business Day newspaper. Petrol price hit 1,000 naira to a liter as scarcity spreads, where we are seeing that that's the average price of the premium motor spirit in most of the filling station black markets in Lagos as of Monday. And then we're seeing the picture story actually showing us the queue, especially this is from Lagos yesterday. Sanwo-Olu looks away as mile 2 teen transport ambition. You can find that in the paper. Criticism as Tinubu heads for France in newly acquired $100 million aircraft. You can read that on the front page of the paper and continue inside the paper. MTNN eyes 85 billion naira savings from tower contracts. You can read that story on front page and continue as well inside the paper. And that's all on Business Day newspaper as well as how far we can go on the program this morning. Thank you, Rachel, for doing this with me. Thank you to our viewers, our supporters, and everyone who made the program a success. So we come again tomorrow. Please do have a great day ahead.